that race is in May. And then whoever proceeds from wins that race will go on to the general election. So the actual election for governor is just about exactly a year from now, a little less than a year from now, in November. So I myself was alcoholic as a young woman. I started drinking at 14, and by the time I stopped at 28, I was a very chronic, round-the-clock drinking alcoholic, and very close to the people that we see on the streets. So for me, this is an issue I have experience in, expertise in, and I personally lived it. And can I just say how excited I am about the whole Slavic Vote initiative that you have all gotten underway, because it's so absolutely critical that people get registered to vote and vote. Because the outsider point is near and dear to my heart, because I'm actually running as an outsider. I come into the race as an outsider. I do not have prior elected experience. And in this race, that is going to be an asset, because the public is tired of the very polarized back and forth for push and shove for power.
Hello, Bridget. Thank you for being here today with us. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for having me on. It's a real pleasure to be here.
Thank you. It's
very excited.
It's good to have you. How are you feeling?
I feel really good. I feel very good about the election coming up, too.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of election, can you tell us a little bit about, first of all, the governor race, right? That's right. What you're running for.
Yeah, let me tell you a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, first off, can I just say how excited I am about the whole Slavic Vote initiative that you have all gotten underway, because it's so absolutely critical that people get registered to vote and vote, because that's what democracy is all about. You have to go out, you have to vote every time. I like to say that I'm a 4-4 voter. That means that 4 out of the last 4 elections I voted, and I try to keep that category running. So I really encourage that effort, and I encourage people to register and participate in the election. So the governor's race that's coming to kind of set it out. I'm running for the Republican nomination for governor, and that race is in May. And then whoever proceeds from wins that race will go on to the general election. So the actual election for governor is just about exactly a year from now, a little less than a year from now, in November. So I'm actively campaigning right now to win that nomination on the Republican side.
Awesome.
And so it is a really, really critical race, I think, for the soul of Oregon right now. The state is in such crisis, and our freedoms are really under assault. Our First Amendment freedoms, our Second Amendment freedoms, private property rights are under assault in Oregon. And we just have this long list of crises facing the state: crime, homelessness, education, natural resource issues, catastrophic fires. The list just goes on. And of course, COVID and the way it's been handled, which has been so heavy-handed, taking our freedoms away and our abilities as free-thinking adults to make decisions for ourselves and for our families and for our businesses. So a cycle like this one, it's kind of interesting, if you let me go on a little bit here.
For sure.
Because when a Democrat president is in their first term, in the midterm, there's a cycle then that pops in Oregon where it is very possible for a Republican to win the election. So the last time this happened was in 1994 with Bill Clinton. Mm-hmm. The next time it happened was in 2010, Barack Obama in his first midterm. So we are at that point again with Joe Biden, middle of his first term, and he is terribly unpopular. So that is an advantage to a Republican running in Oregon. And on top of that, in those past 2 cycles where we did do very well, we had red waves of some degree or another. But this time around, we have all these incredibly pressing issues. And the public, whether they're Democrat, non-affiliated, independent, or Republican, the public is saying, we've had enough. We've had enough of these issues and no progress being made. And in fact, we've been in pretty much a 40-year decline in Oregon on a variety of metrics. So it's a very important race. This kind of a cycle won't come around again for 8 to 12 years, just if you just sort of look at the way elections flow. So it's very important for people that care about freedom, care about getting these issues resolved, to register to vote and to vote. and to
Absolutely.
vote Republican.
Well, as an organization, we can't tell who to vote for or
Right.
just supporting any kind of party. But we're here as a community who has family values and things like that. So we're excited for your race. I think it's going to be a very big race, very important race. And most people in I think in general and the Slavic community, they probably vote the biggest elections that they vote in is presidential elections and
Right.
probably the governor elections or midterm elections, which is what's coming up. Could you, maybe for folks who are recently just getting into this voting thing, can you tell a little bit about what does a governor do versus, a mayor president, or what would you say the difference is?
Well, the governor really is the administrator of the state. The governor, first thing I would do as I come into office is I would have a proposed budget for the state that I would present to the legislature. And then the legislature's business is really, when it comes right down to it, the legislature's business is deciding how to spend the money. But as the governor, you get to set that structure and you get to sort of paint a vision of the direction you want the state to go. And you can create a direction and you can sort of direct the legislature. These are my goals. These are my visions for where I want the state to be. And to some extent, then they have to stay within some of those boundaries. Of course, there's a lot of pushback and negotiating, and that's kind of the legislative process that you see. But one important thing that the governor does as well is appointments. There are boards and commissions and agencies and committees and you name it. There's so many appointments.
Judges too, right?
Judges, yes.
That's a big one, I think.
It's a big one. A very big one,
Yep.
actually. But there are over 240 appointments that the governor has at their discretion.
Wow.
Again, that directs policy by who you select to go into those boards. Now, we haven't been in the governor's office as Republicans for 40 years, 10 cycles. So you can imagine how deep down into every commission and board and agency and department of government the sort of progressive vision has spread. And you can now start to see it in the results that we see around us. And it isn't a pretty picture. So it's very important that the governor has these appointments because it isn't just about the legislative process. Because I'm asked a lot, well, if you go into office and you have a Democrat majority in the House and the Senate, what can you do? And I say, well, you've got all these appointments. The governor's actually running the government, the agencies, the departments, and is the executive of all those branches. So there is a lot of power contained there. Of course, the other thing is that the governor can veto legislation that comes through that they don't approve of. And the governor in Oregon also has a line item veto on bills with money attached, so
Awesome.
tax bills. So
Awesome.
it's lots of different avenues.
So before we get too far
Into the weeds.
politics, I'm looking at you and you have so much energy.
Well, thank you.
So in our culture, it's not very wise to ask a woman what her age is. Or
You can
so we're not
ask.
going to ask that
You
that
can
question.
ask.
But we used to, I know in the last election, we actually had a committee that went around and we actually filtered through people. So what would happen is they would either call the people, they would contact their marketing managers. And we would actually try to meet up with them physically. And we quickly realized that was impossible. So we created a questionnaire, which we just sent out and got a reply back. So this is a lot better for the Slavic community to where they can see a face to a specific name before they actually see it on the ballot.
Right.
We kind of want to know, where did you come from? Where did you grow up? What's your history like? Because the problems that Portland is facing right now, the least I think what people want is another politician in politics. I don't know if that makes sense. People are just tired of career politicians in a way. They want somebody with possible experience. Like, for example, there's a huge homeless crisis that's going on right now where money is just being dumped into it. I live in Vancouver, and I was like, it's never going to happen in Vancouver. It's never going to happen in Vancouver. I drove by a street probably a couple months ago, and there was a whole village there, which I didn't even realize was there. There's issues that I think Portland and Oregon are facing that are on a much smaller scale than, let's say, California. but still, it's something that we really need to pay attention to. So, tell us a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, where you're from, and
Well, first of all, let me say that the outsider point is near and dear to my heart because I'm actually running as an outsider. I come into the race as an outsider. I do not have prior elected experience. And in this race, that is going to be an asset because the public is tired of the very polarized back and forth for push and shove for power. And they want someone to come in that's an outsider, has fresh eyes, that is going to solve problems because these problems have gotten overwhelming while the politicians have just jockeyed for power. And it's very clear to the public now that it doesn't seem like anyone's actually trying to solve them. So I come in as an outsider. I live in West Lynn, so I'm a suburban. I'm kind of a suburban mom, kind of a typical regular person. But I do also have 30 years of background in this arena because my business partner and I published a business magazine for years that focused, and I wrote and edited and researched and advocated on ideas and solutions that were on the conservative side of the ledger, I would say, but they were solutions. And I've been doing that for 30 years. That's why when these particular issues rose up, I said, it's time for me to finally come in as an outsider and run because the very issues I was working on and writing about and advocating on, homelessness and crime and education and the rural urban divide and those natural resource issues. So it was a perfect moment to step in. But let me go back a little and say I was born in Wisconsin and I was raised in Williamsburg, Virginia, which I don't know how many of your listeners would know, but is sort of the cradle of the American Revolution. And I was actually raised there, and it was a really interesting experience to grow up in what was a restored town to look like what it was like during pre-revolutionary days. So these ideas of freedom and working against tyranny and standing up for freedom are really, really sort of etched in my heart from the time I was a child, from growing up there. And they mean more to me than just intellectual. I mean, it's really who I am as a person. So I'm married. I've been married 39 years, and I have 2 adult children who are both married, finally. My daughter got married in September, which was a wild month for me, campaigning and doing the wedding. But that's a good thing. And it's one of the reasons that, so many people talk about just moving away. And my husband and I chose this state 43 years ago as the place we wanted to live. And we love it, and we want to stay here, and we insist that it be a better place to live and raise your family and allow children to grow up safe and not be worried about crime and to be able to send them to school and not worry about what they're being taught. The idea that we've gotten to that point is just unbearable, and it's wrong that our politicians have taken us there. So I do come in as an outsider. And as far as the homelessness issue, it's probably one of the most important ones to me and probably one of the most important reasons I got in the race. And that is because I myself was alcoholic as a young woman. I started drinking at 14, and by the time I stopped at 28, I was a very chronic, round-the-clock drinking alcoholic, and very close to the people that we see on the streets. So for me, this is an issue I have experience in, expertise in, and I personally lived it. And I can tell you that the approach that we've taken of calling it a housing crisis is absolutely backwards. The people that I see on the street, we are enabling them. And it breaks my heart because I relate to them on a human level. And I know, like me, they're making absolute wrong choices every single day. And I know that what has to happen in order to get people to break the addictive cycle is you have to make their lives more difficult until they make another choice. You do not enable them by providing them with tents and blankets and food. And if I'm elected governor, these people will be off the streets, but they will be in humane shelters, which is more than we can say now. We do better for our dogs and cats than we do for these people on the street. So I would take a very tough approach to it, but at the same time, I believe my approach is 100% more compassionate than what we're doing now, because we're letting these people commit slow suicide on the streets. And, driving here, close by, my statewide campaign director, her house was broken into. And her 4-year-old daughter was a few minutes away from getting home and would have run into this burglar inside their home in downtown Portland in a very nice neighborhood. But he was ransacking their house. It's everywhere. You said you didn't think it'd come to Vancouver.
Yeah.
I have been all over the state. And I'm telling you, there is not a tiny little town in Southern Oregon, the coast, anywhere that's not affected by homelessness and rising crime. It has leaked out of Portland. It is an absolute crisis, and it needs to be managed by someone with a different approach. And I have a different approach, and it's a tough approach. I support law enforcement. I support prosecuting offenders of property crimes too. And I support appropriate prison sentences, which are now in the process of being dismantled.
And you have, as a governor, do you have any say over that, or is that district attorney has most of the power over that?
District attorneys have the power to prosecute or not to prosecute, and it is at their discretion.
Mm-hmm.
And prison sentencing, the governor has some role to play, again, mostly through appointments, and actually they have more ability to reduce a sentence than to make it longer. But what I would have control over is taking the bully pulpit strong. And what I mean by that is traveling all over the state and supporting law enforcement in their communities, putting pressure on these district attorneys and people that should be doing the prosecuting. That has to be done through leadership and speaking up in tough terms and being unrelenting about it. And I say I'm relentlessly optimistic. Well, I am relentless, but I am optimistic that we can get this done too. I think we can. We have to.
Well, that's a great point, because we always talk about some of the negative things, but there's obviously some good things that are going on in general in Oregon. What would you say some of the good things that are going on in Oregon?
Well, I'll tell you what. I think the best thing in Oregon is the people by far.
Mm-hmm.
And what we've seen through the pandemic, through wildfires, through all of these things, is we've seen a people, and it's really very, very special. Oregonians are very special. We help each other out in our communities, and we're tough as nails, and we are pretty adaptable and resourceful, and we've seen that over the past couple of years. Mm-hmm. Even when we've been crushed down and stifled by these government mandates, we keep finding ways to do our work and to take care of our families and try to keep businesses afloat. I know some people haven't been able to make it through with their businesses, and it's just so sad and disturbing. But what's right about Oregon is Oregonians, and we have a real sort of independent spirit here, a spirit of freedom here, and we really have to go back to that and find that back, get that back. I mean, we cannot allow ourselves to be crushed by government.
Right, and you partly kind of answered that question. My next question, and you said you were going all around the states, all around the state. What are people saying? What are they seeing that they're not liking, or in general, what are people talking about?
Well, I think probably top of mind right now for a lot of people is the COVID situation, and they're very concerned, especially in smaller towns, with their businesses being restricted, or having to have mask mandates and that sort of thing, because it's really, really hurting them, and they are. I think the everywhere. What I'm starting to hear the most is, what is the end game? We don't have a target. The governor is absolutely absent without leave. Bring her back. Someone get her to tell us what on earth is the target here before we can go back to running our businesses openly, before we can have our churches back, where we can have our masks off in church and see each other and sing and be together in community. We want our freedom back. That's what I'm hearing the most from people, because it is top of mind. And the reason is, like I said, because there's no target. There's no spot that she said, well, if we get to this, then we can go back to normal. We're all just kind of grasping in the dark and feeling very, very at loose ends about how to get out of this. And people want to be done with this.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's the past 2 years were just kind of unreal, and it's kind of interesting because the Slavic community was pretty much dormant for I would say a good 30 years. The first wave of Slavics came to the U.S. probably in the 1990s, right after the fall of the Soviet Union. We also came from a mentality where voting was just not just pointless; it was all decided pre the vote. So. And then we're coming into a country where we kind of piggybacked on the goodwill of the American people for about 30 years because it was great up to 20 years ago or something like that. It was everything that anybody would want with the family trying to live the American dream. Well, what happened within the last 2, 3, 4 years has just been I don't know.
Surprising?
Depressing?
Depressing?
What got to the
Absolutely.
Slavic community was we kind of lived during the Repression era, and we started to realize that, wow, this is like a deja vu. This is all starting to happen again. And the Slavic community didn't know what to do because a lot of times they were in fear because of lack of knowledge of who to vote for, even how to vote.
Right.
That's what we ended up doing the first 2 years was just going and just getting people registered. The percentages were really dismal. It was like 15% were registered, and out of the 15, I think it was like 2 or 3% that were voting. So what would you tell the Slavic community as far as local elections? Because, there's the general election for the president was lost, for example. People were bummed out. But it's not that doesn't make that much of a difference, but it's local is what really makes difference. Because I mean, I live in Vancouver, and the people in charge over there are kind of what I support personally, and it's kind of good. Besides what comes down from the states sometimes, I know in Oregon, for example, right now one of the issues is targeting, for example, of farmers and what they can farm right now. They're saying you can't be inhumane to animals, and there's all these bills that are going to get passed, which are going to push farmers out. And I see, because I was looking for some land to buy, and there's all these farms that are being sold in the middle of Oregon. I'm like, that's very unusual, especially in a period like this. What would you tell the Slavic community, anybody that understands English and is listening to this radio station, of what kind of hope can we have in not just winning, but changing the state?
I can only imagine how dispiriting it is for people to see things sliding the direction that they're sliding if you've come out of a repressive regime and, and you, like you said, got used to the freedom and all. Of course, there's hope. And I want people to be optimistic. And I want people to understand that, first of all, elections have a way of being cyclical, like I mentioned in the beginning. And so when we lose one race, then the next time around, the way the system seems to work here, at least in this country, is it goes in waves and cycles. But that's not a reason to get complacent and just presume that it will. But I would say that we are probably looking at a very big red wave in the sense of Republican wave coming back because of Biden's poor performance. I mean, I'm speaking my own mind here, but poor performance so far. So be optimistic. There is a red wave coming, and it will come in Oregon as well. But I think, we have guarantees of freedoms, and so it can be really tough sometimes to go through the process, and it's a kind of a grinding process sometimes to demand those freedoms and to really grab hold of them. Go through court cases or whatever, but it has to be done. That's how it works here. It just you have to be persistent, and you have to be optimistic that you can prevail in our system because it is set up for citizens to win out. I think the point you made about lower offices is a really important one because one of the mistakes that people make is not participating in those local smaller elections and then wondering why the big one went bad.
Yeah.
And it's because you let those little ones slip away. And people should be thinking in your community about running for office, about running for school boards, about running for a local city council, about running for a county commission seat. these are not impossible dreams. It is possible to step up and learn how to do this process and participate in these lower level races. It's also really, really important, I think. You said something earlier that really stuck with me, and that is that the results were always predetermined. People were used to that. Well, they're not predetermined here. They are a function of the candidate being strong enough and a good enough leader, but it's also they have to have a good organization behind them. They have to have financial support, and they have to have what we call grassroots support, which means people out in the community that literally go door to door and work for them. That's how elections are won, from all the way from the school board race to the presidential race. I mean, people went door to door for the president like they did for the school board member. So your community has to start participating in that way, because we have our democracy, but we will lose it if everyone here doesn't participate. And that begins by voting first, registering, voting, and then, but it's also, participate in these elections, really get involved.
Absolutely. And those are some of our those are pretty much our three pillars of our organization, is activating and registering and essentially running for local office. So
yes.
So I appreciate that, and we have a few minutes left.
Okay.
You unfortunately have to run already, but as folks to finish this program, could you tell folks a little bit about I think one of the most confusing things about elections, at least for me, is understanding the primaries. That's coming up for you as well. How do you feel about the primaries? And if once you win the general election, once you win the primary elections, why do you think you can win the general election?
Right. Okay. So in my primary, there are already 14 people signed up to run just to be the Republican nominee. So it can be a confusing process, I'm sure, for a voter as you go through your voter pamphlet, like, who do I vote for? Yeah. Do your homework in advance, first of all, and know, and here's what you should know, and here's what I'd like to leave your listeners with. That is, make sure that the person you're voting for really, truly espouses the values that you espouse. I am a very solid conservative. I believe in freedom. I believe in freedom for every individual. The second thing they should be looking at is, who do they think that if they vote for them, who can win the general election? Because sometimes you might see a candidate and think, well, I kind of really like that one, but I like this one too, and this one looks like they could win the general election against the progressive leftist out there, that's doing all this heavy-handed government stuff. It's important to choose a candidate that can win the general election that also represents your points of view. So I feel personally that I am the most able to win the general election, and the reason is because I'm an outsider, because I don't have a record of elected office, because I represent the suburban woman, a new face of the Republican Party that will be easier for some of these people in the middle to vote for. And I bridge the urban-rural divide. I represent both sides of that. So I think I offer voters someone that they can look at and say, she looks like me. She looks like a regular person, but someone with experience and someone that actually wants to solve problems and doesn't want to do this partisan fighting stuff. So. All
right. Well, thank you very much. Yeah. You unfortunately have to get going.
My website is bridgetbartonfororegon.com. If people could go and take a look, and I've got an intro video there, and follow me on Facebook too. That's a lot of fun.
Yes.
I try to post almost every day. And thank you so much for having me on, and good luck on Slavic Vote. I love it.
Thank you very much, and good luck with your race, and good luck with whatever you got going on tonight.
Heading down to Salem for another meeting. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you very much. Our candidate that's going to be running for next year as well, for any election, any position, you just go to our website. We already have a section where you could fill out a request to be included in our voter guide. And you can simply just enter that on our website. Again, it's slavicvote.org. And that will give you the ability to be to essentially present your position, your platform, your values to the Slavic community. So then when there is a general election, we can present that, and the voters can have the best information and best resources for that. So as an organization, we don't tell people who to vote for. We just simply give out resources and material of all these candidates, and they can make their decision. So today was one of those candidates, and I'm excited for her race and all the other races. I think there's a lot of great candidates. I see something special about Bridget, and I've got to know her for a little while. And I think most importantly, she's been a supporter of ours from almost the very beginning. So I'm excited for her, and I think she has a bright future ahead.
Yeah, I think she said there's 14 people running. That's like 14.
Exactly. We definitely have a lot of, we're going to continue this program next year. So there's a lot of opportunity there. I think I'm already in communication with some of the candidates that are running for next year, and we're going to, just to make sure we got everybody who wants to do this, we'll probably set up something else and probably do a Zoom call and get all of their platforms out, and this way we'll be able to get everybody or as many people as possible to reach out to us.
Yeah, I think it'd be great for the Russian community to see these people in live, because a lot of times when you get the pamphlet and you're just looking at somebody's face, unless you start doing research, then they're not going to answer all your general questions. So
Absolutely. Well, thanks for everybody who tuned in.
Власти региона. Выборы, кандидаты, стремления. Новая программа Slavic Vote Live. Каждую неделю в прямом эфире. Slavic Vote Live дает голос славянской общине по всему северо-западу. Мы говорим и информируем о важном в Вашингтоне, Орегоне, Калифорнии. По четвергам в 17:00. Присоединяйтесь к прямому эфиру на 10:40 AM. Ищите Slavic Vote в соцсетях. Мы намерены продолжать продвигать свое видение и оказывать любую необходимую поддержку сообществу, чтобы изменить ситуацию к лучшему. Slavic Vote Live.